Welcome. Today we will continue to break down Louisiana's drug laws. In this episode, we're going to focus on Schedule II drug offenses. Let's look at a few of the drugs that are found in Schedule II. Opium, hydrocodone, morphine, cocaine, fentanyl, and methadone. This is not an all-inclusive list, but these are some of the most common drugs that are found in Schedule II. There are two more after this list: amphetamine and methamphetamine. So what are some of the penalties you would face if you were caught with a Schedule II drug in Louisiana? It is unlawful to produce, manufacture, distribute, or possess with the intent to distribute Schedule II drugs. If it's less than 28 grams, the minimum penalty is 1 year in prison or jail. The max penalty is up to 10 years. And you will be looking at a fine of up to $50,000. So be careful. The best thing you can do is just stay away from these drugs. Same drugs, but now you produce, manufacture, distribute, or possess with the intent to distribute 28 grams or more. So if it's 27.9 grams, you're not going to be subject to these enhanced penalties. But 28 grams or more, you're looking at a minimum of 1 year. And now the maximum prison term is 20 years. The fine up to $50,000. Now when we get to talking about methamphetamine, there are specific penalties in Schedule II for methamphetamine. If you're caught with methamphetamine, the minimum penalty is 10 years. And WOB means without benefit of probation, parole, or suspension of sentence. If you have this meth in the presence of a child 12 years old or younger, you're looking at a minimum of 15 years. And the max, my friends, is 20 years. And look at this fine. It's almost unreal, but this is what the law says. You are looking at a fine of up to $500,000. If the Schedule II drug is cocaine, oxycodone, or methadone, there are special penalty provisions for that as well. You're looking at a minimum of 10 years without benefit of probation, parole, or suspension of sentence, and a max of up to 30 years in prison, as well as a fine up to $500,000. Fentanyl, we all know what that is. This stuff is wiping people out, killing people left and right. And the states are recognizing that. Louisiana is one of those states. If you're caught with fentanyl, if you're caught producing, manufacturing, distributing, or possessing with the intent to distribute fentanyl, the penalties are serious. If it's less than 28 grams, the minimum is 5 years without the benefit of probation, parole, or suspension of sentence. And the max is 40 years. So you can be looking at a substantial prison sentence for the very first time you get caught with fentanyl. And truth be told, the stuff is killing people, so I understand the harshness of the penalties. And you will also be looking at a fine of up to $50,000. When we get to 28 grams or more of fentanyl, the penalty gets progressively worse for each conviction. On the first conviction, you're looking at a minimum of 7 years in prison without benefit, and the max is 40 years. you will be looking at a fine of up to $50,000. So what happens if you get a second conviction? You are now looking at a minimum prison sentence of 30 years. At least 10, the first 10 is without the benefit of probation, parole, or suspension of sentence. And the max penalty, once again, is 40 years. And look at this fine. It's 10 times more than the first conviction. The fine goes from a fine of up to $50,000 to now up to $500,000. Look what happens on your third conviction of 28 grams or more, but less than 250 grams. You are looking at a minimum prison sentence of 99 years. You know, I don't know about y'all, but I don't expect to get 99 years out of this body, even from birth, much less if you're an adult. You can pretty much count on spending the rest of your life in prison. If you have 28 grams or more of fentanyl, but less than 250 grams, and this is the third conviction. You're looking at a fine of up to $500,000. I know the fine might look absurd because if you're going to prison forever, you're probably not going to be able to pay the fine. But this is what the law allows. They're really trying to clean up this dangerous drug that's taking lives daily. Well, what if you have 250 grams or more of fentanyl? If you are convicted for having 28 grams or more of fentanyl, you will get a life sentence, and you will serve a minimum of 25 of those years without probation, parole, or suspension of sentence. And you're going to be looking at a little fine of up to $50,000. What we just finished covering applies to what most people would consider to be drug dealers: producing, manufacturing, distribution, possession with intent to distribute. Those are the penalties that typically apply to people who law enforcement or the prosecutor believes are drug dealers. What if you're a drug user? The penalties still can be pretty substantial. However, for possession, you're going to be looking at a bit less. What are some of the penalties for possession of Schedule II drugs? Let's go right into it. First of all, this is simply what the law says. It is unlawful to knowingly and intentionally possess a controlled dangerous substance without a valid prescription. Now, any of these drugs, if you have a prescription from a doctor, that's a legal defense. Now, I don't know where you're going to get a prescription for cocaine or meth, but some of the others you can actually get a prescription for. And if you have a valid prescription, that's a defense. So the penalties are, if it's less than 2 grams, you're going to be looking at jail or prison up to 2 years and up to a fine of $5,000. If it's more than 2 grams but less than 28 grams, you're looking at a minimum jail sentence of 1 year with a maximum of 5 and a fine of up to $5,000. This drug, phencyclidine, has its own penalty provisions. If you have less than 28 grams of this drug, you're looking at a minimum of 1 year and a maximum of 20 years and a fine of up to $5,000. Fentanyl, here we go again. Fentanyl has its own penalty provision. Less than 2 grams, 2 to 4 years in prison. And the legislature has made it mandatory for the court to order you to attend a drug treatment program. 2 grams or more of fentanyl, but less than 28 grams, you're looking at 2 to 10 years in prison. A drug treatment program, up to a $5,000. That short presentation covers the most common drugs found and abused in Schedule II of Louisiana's Controlled Dangerous Substance Laws. If you are ever in need of legal advice concerning any of these items, don't hesitate to reach out because the penalties for many of them are substantial.